There we go. And welcome, everyone. So glad to have you here for the third of our Transforming Science Teaching Planning for the Post-COVID New Normal. And I'm mindful that this is being taken up by a lot of folks who are not thinking about a new normal. So I'm excited to have the speakers we've already had, the speaker we're having today, and the speakers that we will have coming up. And today I'm excited to have Renae Pullen here on supporting linguistically diverse students in STEM. And before we get started, I want to acknowledge the land that I am on and encourage you all to go. I will drop it in the chat in case you do not land. If you do not know whose land you reside on, I come to you today from Hachiman and Tongva land here in Irvine in Southern California. And I am mindful and reminded of the fact that I am an uninvited guest on this land. And I am also mindful that the Tongva and Hachiman continue to protect this land and watch this land. And I think for us as STEM educators, especially, we have a responsibility to think about folks, Indigenous folks, of what they have done and what they continue to do here in Southern California. I'm especially mindful of the fact that they have done fire management and land management for centuries, long before white folks came along. And I am mindful of the wildfires and other things that are being caused now that are man-made and we need to address. All right, a couple of quick announcements before we dig in. Want to let you know that there are a couple of 3 more sessions in this series coming up. I'm excited to have Wanda Faye Bryant here with us, and she will be with us again about a month from now, talking about quad text sets, a framework to engage all learners in scientific practices and work towards mastering complex text. I'm mindful of our kind of post-fact and post-truth world and how important that is. And then in May, we will have Lori Anderson with us talking about developing place-based agricultural science, distance learning materials in work that she is doing in Hawaii. And then in June 9th, we will bring everybody back. Hopefully everybody is not completely exhausted by that point. And we'll have a conversation with everyone thinking about concrete steps and actions that we can take moving forward. Also want to let you know, and I'll drop this link in the chat in just a moment, that we are recording these sessions. And if you wanted to see any of the prior sessions, you are welcome to watch those. We had one on ungrading, and we also had one on identifying and creating focal phenomena. All right, I'm going to skip today's plan because that's your plan, Renae, not my plan. So I will defer to you on that, but let me introduce you. So super excited to have Renae Pullen with us. She has earned a master's degree in educational leadership from Louisiana State University. She come to, I guess I should say where you come to us from. She is coming to us from Shreveport, Louisiana. Am I right? Yes? Okay, good. She has been an elementary science specialist in Caddo Parish public schools for over 6 years. Prior to that, she was an elementary school teacher for 16 years. She's a member of the Louisiana Science Teachers Association and the Society of Elementary, the Society of Elementary Presidential Awardees. Besides being a dedicated science educator, Ms. Pullen has served on several local, state, and national committees, as well as presented numerous workshops and conferences. She's a member of the Louisiana State Standards for Science work group that developed the new science standards. She currently serves as a member of the Board of Science Education for the National Academies of Science, which is awesome to see teaching folks represented in that group. She's a STEM ambassador for NSTA and CTM, and a member of the National Science Foundation Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics Educational Advisory Panel. She received a number of awards, including several grants and fellowships. These awards include the Walmart Local Teacher of the Year Award in 2007, the Caddo Parish Teacher of the Year Award in 2006, and the Presidential Award for Excellence in Math and Science Teaching. I am so excited to have her here with us, and I will stop share and turn it over to you. Thanks for being here, Renae.
Thank you. You make me sound, I sound so good on paper.
Pretty amazing, pretty amazing.
Do you see my screen, and does it say supporting linguistically diverse students? Is that a yes?
There we go.
Yeah, okay. Let me put the chat right here so I can see it. Okay, so as Dorian said, I am Renae Pullen. I am from Shreveport, Louisiana. I wanted to show you where and I'm in my office right now because I had a hot mess of a day, and that's just how it went down for me today. So I always show where I am in relation to New Orleans, which is right here, and I am here in North Louisiana. So if you want to know where in the world am I, there goes some information for you. For our agenda, what I want us to do is we're going to have an overview of the research that supports what I'm going to talk about today, talk about having an asset-oriented view of students. We're going to find promise with our linguistically diverse students, and I will refer to them as ELs, but this could apply to a lot of our students who have some language opportunities for us to use in our classrooms, and then we will wrap it up. And so our goals is we're going to find some promising approaches. I want us to investigate some high impact instructional strategies, and then look at some of the ways we can capitalize off of the students' resources. And so what we're talking about today is everything is based off of a report that I was able to be a part of the committee, and it is called the English Language Learners in STEM Subjects, Transforming Classroom, Schools, and Lives. And in our report, we examined the research on EL learning, teaching, and assessment in STEM subjects, and we provided some guidance on how to improve student outcomes in STEM. And so I just wanted you to know that what I'm sharing with you is going to be evidence-based and research-based. And so why is this important? Why was it important for us to have this report? Why is it important for us to talk about these things together? And so one of the things we were able to conclude based on the evidence was that frequently our English language learners, they lacked access to school-based STEM learning opportunities. So like in elementary, they would be removed from the science class for language proficiency reasons. They would not be placed in higher math classes, higher science classes, or AP classes for no reason other than they have some language proficiency obstacles that some people would think would be an issue, and not see the beauty in language for our students. And so the other thing we found out that that they were not also able to get into rigorous courses for mathematics, things like AP. And so having those limitations to our students, they limit opportunities for them to learn, but also opportunities for society to benefit from the wonderful things that they can give. And so that's one of the reasons why it's important. I also want to quickly touch on that as we go through today's presentations. There are some policy things, whether you're on a district or state level, that's important and that we uncovered as we went through the report. And one of them is that there is no common definition for English learners across our states. We learned that there is not a common approach for classifying ELs and that there is no consistency, which this one blew my mind, that there is no consensus on the English language proficiency standards. And so depending upon what state you're in, how they value English language proficiency can change. And so that's something to think about when we're thinking about the policies and the systems that impact our English language learners before they even get into our classroom. And so sometimes knowing these policies, it can make it challenging in the classrooms to support our students. And a lot of times we will have policies that are meant to help our English learners, but these policies often do harm. And so there are opportunities for improvements that are definitely happening. But I think having an understanding of the history of how we got here, what's happening within our systems and what continues to happen is kind of important to know and understand as we work with the students in our classroom. And so it's really important that we make sure that we are having an asset-oriented view. Like, let's start there when it comes to what can we shift. So we can't change all of the policies right now. So what are some of the asset-oriented views that we can have of our students? And I do want to start, so from this point on, when I'm referring to our English learners, I will be referring to our English learners who are not identified, what most states would identify as newcomers. I'm going to speak of, so I can't, I'm going to go ahead and go on, but yeah, I want us to make sure that we're focusing on our English language learners who are not necessarily newcomers to the United States. And so with this asset-oriented view, one thing that's really important with working with our English learners is that we focus on their capabilities. What is it that they bring to the classroom? And that's what we mean when we say an asset-oriented view. We want to focus on their strengths. We want to focus on their experiences, their lived experiences, and how they make meaning of things, instead of focusing on what we deem is a weakness, because there's things that they can offer for our students, for our other students who may not be English learners. And so every English language learner brings a rich perspective, and they have resources that can be very innovative in the classroom and that can promote STEM learning. And our students are worthy of sharing their information, and other students need to hear what it is that they have to offer. So they bring multiple competencies to STEM. Our English language learners can use their language as a resource, not just for themselves, but for the other kids in the classroom. And so they have a capacity to engage in STEM disciplinary practices and learn the content as they improve their language proficiency. And then finally, they have a future in STEM. And we really need to believe that they have the capacity to enrich their lives and the lives of others through STEM. And so that's one of the main reasons why we want to make sure that we have an asset-based view of our students. So what I want you to put into the chat is take a second to think about this question. Why is it important for educators to have an asset-oriented view of their students? Why do we want to make sure that we're capitalizing off of what they bring to the classroom and the positives, rather than focusing on what we consider to be a language deficiency, which is what we would call a deficit mindset? So as you type in, here's some of the things that I've seen talking about. It's an opportunity to be equitable to all students. If we build on their assets, we can better meet the needs. I like that. They can feel more comfortable. Students have family and community insights that can be leveraged in the classroom. So I think these are some great things that we are thinking about. And when we're talking about our students and what it is that they can bring to our classrooms. But it's really important when we talk about our beliefs. Like, we always talk about having high expectations of our students, and we have to believe that. We don't want to have a bias against our students, and that can be a detriment to their success. So we definitely want to focus on their strengths. We want to give them lots of opportunities to learn. And so if we think and what we think and believe about our students, it will guide our practices. And based on the review of the literature, we were able to conclude in the report that teachers' beliefs and expectations of their students have a pretty big impact on our ELs. When teachers have positive expectations for their beliefs and positive beliefs about ELs and STEM, they are likely to give them the learning opportunities, to make sure that they are in those classrooms, to make sure that they have the opportunities to express themselves in a variety of ways. And we want to make sure that we are positioning our ELs as capable and competent learners who can influence STEM learning in the classroom and provide better outcomes for themselves and others in society. And so a lot of what you all were saying, that's valuable as to why we should have this asset view and why we need to really interrogate our own beliefs and our own bias that we may have, whether it is intentional or unintentional, with our students, so that we are not doing things like saying, oh, we have to really just focus on them improving their language and limit them from STEM opportunities. That's not what we learned from this research. That isn't what we should be doing, and that's not going to be the best outcomes for our students. So what we really should be doing is finding promise. And how can we find promise with our students? How can we give them opportunities so that we can capitalize on all of the beautiful things that they bring to our classrooms? And so let's look at some promising approaches and some instructional practices that are a way to go. And as we do this, I want you to understand I'm looking at this in the way of the 5 subjects of STEM coming together along with language, so that this is something that is intertwined as opposed to language is completely separate in STEM. And I am saying the subjects of STEM because I know traditionally in our classrooms, we are not doing an integrated STEM approach in most of our classrooms. So many of us are science teachers, math teachers, things like that. So in that scope, we're looking at this as our 5 subjects of STEM coming together. So here are some promising approaches. So we talked already about the asset-based approach, shifting from deficit-oriented pedagogy, especially how we think about our students linguistically, more to the asset-oriented pedagogy. And I've gotten these next 2 slides from Dr. Oki Lee from New York University. I really like it because she tells a story of when she was in school. And at first it was all, oh, poor Oki, you know, in English language. And in English, she struggles with language, poor Oki. But then she goes to math and science, where she really thrived. And then it's, oh, great Oki, wonderful Oki. Well, how can we have that asset-based approach in all of the classrooms and see that, like what Oki would say is, they focused a lot on my language, but they didn't focus on what I was bringing to the classroom, my experiences, my thoughts. They didn't acknowledge my gestures when I did that to talk about and demonstrate my understanding. And so the students bring lots of assets. And so are we capitalizing them? So here are some of the things that our students bring that are important. They bring their multimodality. They have many ways that they can share and show what they know. They bring their experiences. They bring their language, and I think that's beautiful, and we need to capitalize off of it. They also bring the abilities, the things that they can do. They bring their goals, their dreams, their passions. Are we capitalizing off of that? Do we even know what they are? And so make sure that one of the things that we're doing is we're valuing the assets that our students bring to our classrooms. And so here, I want to talk about some approaches that we can reimagine. So there are some things that we tend to do with our ELs that can be low impact. And so let's kind of focus on those high impact strategies. And so these are some things I'd like for you to take away. Instead of focusing on vocabulary as a prerequisite, so front loading and pre-teaching vocabulary for most English language learners, definitely for our newcomers, sometimes that can be very beneficial to help them enter into the classroom. But for most English language learners, we want our students to use the language as a product. So we want them to be have that language surrounded by context, have the vocabulary surrounded by context and experiences, and then they can attach that language to it so that language is a product of interaction with other students instead of being a prerequisite for even being a part of the learning in the first place. Another approach to reimagine is having content objectives separate. And so I have not experienced this, but one thing that we learned from the report is that sometimes a learning objective for English language learners would look something like a student will describe the molecular change that occurred using the past tense ed form. Well, that's not really great for science, but that's also not great for language. And so here in the high impact, a better functional use of language, and that objective would be students will collaboratively construct an explanation of the effect of thermal energy on molecular movement. And the way that is written and the expectations that would come is clearly the students are going to have to do something, and then once they write out their ideas, once they communicate through that experience, they will use the language as a part of learning the science. And that is where those conversations can come about the conventions of language. And the last approach to reimagine is simplifying the content for the sake of the English language learners. Our English learners have the capacity to engage in STEM meaningfully. And so students should give the opportunity, just like all of their counterparts, to be able to grapple with complex science and mathematical ideas. They have the capacity to do it. And so they should not be limited from those experiences just because they're also improving their English language proficiency. Another approach is to leverage school community relationship, and that school family community relationship should be a not just a one-way street. It should be like a very intense highways, byways. You got everything crossing over, coming over. Here's a bridge, go under. It goes both ways. There is something that families and communities can bring to the school that should be valued. There are things that the schools can offer to the families and communities, and that's really important. I think one thing that I've learned from this pandemic is that we absolutely can do a better job of respecting and honoring the things that our families and communities bring to our school, and really thinking about how we can capitalize off of that. And then collaboration among STEM and EL teachers, ESL teachers. A lot of times our ESL teachers, we found, mostly focus on working with teachers in English language arts, and then that's it. And then there's not a whole lot left for our students, our teachers of mathematics and science. our ESL teachers have some great expertise, and they can help use language functionally in science and mathematics. So here's another question I have for you to think about and put into the chat before we get to some of our breakout rooms is, what are some new ways you have learned? Actually, I'd like this to be, instead of in the chat, is it possible we can unmute and just have a talk out, Doran?
Whatever you want. I can make
Yeah,
it.
so just unmute yourself
yep.
on this one, and let's give ourselves about 2 minutes to share if you've had any experiences in during the pandemic. Have you discovered any new ways that you can work and partner with families or your communities? Have you discovered any new community partners? What has been your experience? Go ahead, Elise.
Elisa.
Elisa.
For me, I have in my life done many family STEAM nights, but in the COVID time, I approached a principal at a school. I'm the curriculum specialist, and I said, I'd love to try a virtual STEAM night. And I got some community partners like Inside the Outdoors to bring animals, and we had 4 breakout rooms. We made it very simple. We sent home a bag of mystery supplies and some parachute supplies, and then we had one breakout room was journaling and one was the animals. And it was fabulous because I would never not do a virtual STEAM night now. I would always include that because I could see families living in the background, like cooking and babies crawling. And it occurred to me that perhaps some of these families wouldn't have made it to the in-person STEAM night. And so it seemed more equitable. And it was really fun. We had teachers in the breakout rooms so they could facilitate like the Zoom share out like this. And it was inspiring and surprisingly so, because I could see life happening in the background, and kids were great. They would be like, Dad, you better mute yourself. You're bossing me around. It was fun.
And I think that could be a wonderful opportunity even to have families share the different ways that they can engage in STEM, whether it is through their work or the things that they do at home. So that's a wonderful opportunity to really explore how you can talk and share ideas about STEM experiences while they're at home. Let's have one more person, and I can't see everybody. So if you just want to go ahead and talk out and share.
Hi, everyone.
Hey, Anna.
Hi, I just wanted to share one activity that I did to try to integrate my students' family. So we did like an inquiry-based science lesson where students went through the learning process and learned, created essentially a circuit, a little circuit. They have, an LED light, some batteries, and we send them the little kits home. And then they went through the whole inquiry base, they set up and then, learned how to create their circuit. And then one of the activities that we had them do is that we have them reflect on Flipgrid, their experience, but then we also have them challenge their family, like any family member. And so then they recorded their family posting the same challenge. Okay, with this material, try to, create this, make this LED light turned on. So this is one of the ways where we integrated the family members into the classroom, essentially. And then they really have fun with that.
Thank you. And so it sounds, and I like that they are able to, sorry, go ahead.
It was just an echo. Go ahead.
Okay. So thank you all for sharing your experiences with your families, with your community. And so certainly STEM nights are one way to explore those partnerships. And I like the idea of having things sent home, things that are virtual, because it gives them a different way to enter in to these experiences. And so next I want to talk about some promising instructional practices. So we identified 5 promising instructional strategies. I'm going to go through 5 of the strategies. And then what you all are going to do is you're going to go out into breakout rooms and you will dig deeper into 3 of the instructional strategies. So one instructional strategy is for students to engage in the disciplinary practices, mainly the disciplinary practices of mathematics, the mathematical practices, and these practices of science and engineering. Another is to have students engage in productive discourse, have collaborative conversations, and have thoughtful interactions with others, and making sure that your classroom is a safe place in which that can happen. Another promising instructional practice is that we want to value and honor all of the ways that our students communicate. And so whether that's through speaking, writing, listening, gestures, even translanguaging, like we want to make sure that we are utilizing the different ways that students use their registers and the different modalities that they have. We want to leverage, another promising instructional practice is to leverage multiple ways that students can use resources to make meanings. And so students make meanings in a variety of ways. And we want our English learners to make sure that they are engaging in those experiences. And then the last is to provide some explicit focus on how language functions in the discipline. So students would focus more on exploring the content and using language with intention throughout the lessons, rather than just having vocabulary separate from content and not really having any context. So these are our 5 promising instructional strategies. And what I want you to do is I want you to dig in. So I want to show you an example of what that's going to look like. And then you are going to be separated out into your different breakout groups. You will look over one of the instructional practices, and then you will share a takeaway. So what are some things that you want to take away that you've learned, that you're going to take, that you've learned, and then what is a take with you? So, and let me show you so it makes sense then. Do you see the next slide? It should say group slide deck. Perfect. All right, my internet's taking forever. So this is what we'll do. We're going to have a gallery walk for the ask and harvest. And so the ask is that you dig deeper into one of the promising instructional strategies, and a harvest is going to be a takeaway and a take with you. So a takeaway is what you learned. A take with you is something that you can do next week in your classroom, or something you can do next week to share with another teacher. And you have group assignments. If you are in breakout room 1 or group 1, you will do productive discourse. If you are in breakout room 2, you will do leverage meaning making resources. And if you are in group 5, if you are in group 3, breakout room 3, you will do language functions in the discipline. Let me share this with you, putting the link into the chat. Chat's right there, Renae. And as you enter, I want to give you an example of how I'd like for it to be done, so that you'll know what that looks like. So let's look at disciplinary practices. I'll click on that and it'll take me to another slide, and the slide that'll have all the information that you need. And so I know I'm doing engaging in disciplinary practice because that's the one that's purple. My ask is that I review student disciplinary practices, which is on this page right here in the report that I talked about. I can tell you now, it is not essential that you reread or go through the information or the selection and the report. So that's kind of up to you if you just want to skim through that really quickly and then explore the vignette. I have the vignette in the PowerPoint, and then you're going to discuss your takeaways. And that will be done on the main slide. So let's go through. I've looked at let's pretend that I've looked at the report. And so now I am going to engage students in the disciplinary practices. And here are the disciplinary practices of science and mathematics. This lesson focuses on the science practices. And so I wanted you to see what the practices were if you were not familiar with the science and engineering practices or the mathematical practices. And so the vignette starts with talking about MRSA and why has it become resistant to antibiotics. And so the students will do a series of lessons to understand the phenomena. Why have some bacteria become resistant to antibiotics? And so the first thing they do is they construct an explanatory model to explain that 60% of this specific bacteria, it's resistant to antibiotics. And so they start their explanatory model, and it's framed by talking about students' experiences in a hospital. So on the next slide, as I'm making sense of what's happening, it tells me more information so that during the lesson, the students constructed an explanatory model. They explored the question, what do you think someone could be harmed from bacteria while staying at a local hospital? And so that's the questions that the students explored in the example of how do we engage in disciplinary practices. So they've done the practices of starting a model and starting an explanation. They're looking at a question. Do you think someone could be harmed from bacteria while staying at a local hospital? The next slide shows you an example of what an EL student wrote. And the student wrote, hospitals are very clean. They tend to make visitors put sanitizer on before entering a patient's room or have contact with a patient. Also, after leaving, you put sanitizers. And so that gives an opportunity for students to enter into this lesson. It isn't a huge requirement that they know how to say, they know all what does MRSA mean. They don't have to have a whole lot of language or vocabulary discussions before they get into this experience. And then they use graphic organizers to clarify important ideas. So they look at this YouTube video, which I'm going to show really quickly. And well, we don't have time. But in the YouTube video,
A GMA medical alert, nearly 24 schools are closed this morning, hoping to prevent an outbreak of a deadly infection after a Virginia.
So this seems very close to home, right? And so in the news thing, Robin talks about how there is this virus. It has hurt more people than AIDS. And at the time, you know, we're being able to get AIDS under control, but this MRSA, I'm not sure if y'all were around, but that was a huge deal. And so it talks about a super bug, it talks about resistance, and then finally, after students make sense of that YouTube video, they make the model, they explore questions, they do tests with different different investigations with bacteria. They have refined and revised their explanatory model. They do so many things throughout this experience of lessons to make sense of why have bacteria become resistant to antibiotics. And so that's what we want our students to do when they are engaging in the disciplines. And so what I want you to do, and then what I did next is you come back to this page, and on one slide, I told my takeaways. Students need to engage in science through disciplinary practices, and the focus on practice, focusing on practices can lead to success for students, and then a take with me. And that one thing is I'm going to relate lessons to students. So what I want you to do is when we break out, you'll have about, where are we at time? We'll have about 8 minutes just to look through the slides. And then we'll share what our take with me's takeaways are, and then we can wrap things up. Do you have any questions? Okay, Doran, can we go ahead and break out?
Everybody should have gotten an invitation to a breakout room. And if you did not, let me know. Looks like everybody's getting in. And
Okay, I'm going to.
Renae, do you want to say anything for the people? So I'm going to pause the recording here in just a second, and I know some people will watch this later. Any thoughts for them other than engaging in this activity kind of on their own time?
Oh, and you will give them access to, I need to give you the access to the PowerPoint, but yeah, just really focusing on having a classroom in which students feel comfortable expressing themselves using their home language, along with precise science and mathematical language, or even if they're using a mixture of both, letting them have the opportunity to share their thoughts, share their experiences, and to collaborate with one another. And that's okay, like that's what you do in the classroom. Planning for that intentionally is really important. And using, if sometimes you can feel like you're all alone, like you don't have a lot of support, but what you do have is you have other experts on your campus, whether they are English teachers, ESL teachers. They have the opportunity to collaborate with you to support what you do in the classroom every day. And so take advantage of that as well. And I think that's like the biggest thing, is just to really think about, interrogate how you think about your students, really collaborate with other teachers and allow students to collaborate in the classroom.
Awesome. Thank you, Renae.
It's my Zoom is like, you cannot share your screen. Am I frozen?
You want me to share? I'll share. I can share. Here we go. You tell me where to go. I will share the screen, and I think we'll be good. And tell me where to go.
I got kicked out.
No problem.
Okay, so let's look at the slide, the next slide, slide 4. Let's go to slide 6. Okay, so let's go ahead and have group 1 talk about productive discourse.
I volunteer, Anna.
Thanks, Wanda.
Hi, everyone. So the takeaway, it took us a minute to get into, position ourselves in the group, but, we managed to get there. So productive discourse, the goal of it is to engage students in science and math practices and giving them that space where they could orally kind of, go through the thought process and be able to orally express it. And so we learned about different strategies. So if you go to the next slide, we learned about different strategies where we could promote this productive talk. And one of the ways you could do that is by doing scaffolding, where you have students do like sentence starters. You provide them with those sentence starters so that you could, create this, that science talk or math talk. And then another thing that you could do, right, is really create that space where they could interact orally with the subject, and then this could be alone with the partner. And then the report, right, goes into more details as to, detailed about talk moods, that sometimes it's called disciplinary talk as well. And that's kind of where we're at. So just, I think as far as the group wise, we just want to be able to continue promoting this in our classrooms. And as we're teaching math and science, just allow that space to allow them to interact with the content and be able to orally practice it. Not just reading, hearing, but them orally articulate themselves so that they could be able to meaning making. It only happens if we give them the opportunity to talk about it.
So, and I love that. It only happens if we give them the opportunity to talk about it. And when I share, and I'll be sharing my slides with you, I'm going to add in a few more slides about disciplinary talk and talk moves into the main slide deck, so that you all can have a better understanding of what are talk moves, what are the moves for students, because with talk moves, there are certain things we want our teachers to do and how they ask questions, how they respond to students. And then we have certain moves and things that we want the students to do as well, so that they are given access into having these conversations. They have these sentence starters. They have moves around how can they clarify? How can they add on to what another student was thinking? How can they disagree with the student respectfully? Do they have a space to be able to change their mind on what they thought from the beginning? And also what's really important is, do students know, do they have a move to ask for more think time? Before I go to the next group, I want to throw in a quick story about why think time is very important for English learners. And that was one thing that we also discovered in the report. But in my own experience, I remember I had a little girl, and she asked me one day, she goes, "Miss Pullen, will you give me a little bit more time to think? Because when I think, I have to think in Spanish and then I can think in English." And I was floored, because I had been teaching for at that point, about 7-8 years. And it never dawned on me that my kiddos were having this really intense cognitive experience in their minds as they are learning the subject that I'm teaching, as they were learning. And so I think that was a huge cognitive load, but I didn't know that they were doing that. I didn't realize that they were having to translate in their minds. And so I felt horrible, because I felt like that was a disservice to my students that I had in the past who didn't speak English as a first language. And that also showed me that I needed to improve my own instructional practices to better understand my students, to better respect what it is that they were bringing into the classroom, value what was happening in their brains. And I also needed to listen and understand more of what their experiences were and what they were dealing with, so that I can be a better teacher and I could give them better outcomes. And so when we think about having our students collaborate and having our students talk, we also have to value what are the experiences that are happening when they are doing that. And so if they are translanguaging, if they're using home language, their home, the language that they speak, along with English in the classroom, I think that is a beautiful thing that we can leverage, as opposed to saying, you can only speak English in my classroom. And so really thinking about how we can capitalize off of language. So let's look at group 2. What is it that you would like to share?
Okay, I'll talk, but I talked before, so, but we were saying, so I wish everybody could see the picture. The teacher presents a rectangle, but it's got multiple shapes inside, which really was impressive because using objects to let all students enter the task was powerful. You know, she just really open-endedly, the teacher says, like, what do you see? And the student says paralela, but the student could say triangular or rectangular. So there were so many different ways, you know, which made us think about that, having a complex thing. Gestures were helpful. Students could use them to demonstrate what he meant, but the teacher also revoiced. And then we noticed that the teacher repeated the word many times, right? So that's way different than pre-teaching vocabulary. It's using what the student said and then highlighting it. One big takeaway for us was that it takes time, like there's multiple dips, right? And sometimes I know, like for myself, I might have my goal in mind and rush, right? And I don't think that always supports English learners. She used cognates and allows for a mixture of languages, right? Spanish and English. It doesn't have to be in English. Did I leave out anything, friends? Susanna or Jennifer? No.
No, I think that was good.
Okay.
And what is one thing that you will take with you that you can do ASAP?
Okay, can you go to the next slide? So we thought this, for sure, allowing more time, right? Because,
Yeah.
And then secondly, multiple points of entry. So if you look at that, everybody else, you'll see that it's a object that allows for lots of different things to be talked about, right? So we don't know what the goal was. Maybe it was just talking about shapes, you know, for something later, but anybody could have said anything, right? And then I thought that those things, like at Take With Me ASAP, is that these moves, like the gesturing, the time, and the repeating, are really highlight the development of language via science, right? It's very embedded.
Thank you. Can I go ahead and share my screen, Doran? And hopefully I will not get kicked out this time.
Yep. And as you do that, I just wanted to say, Elisa, what I really appreciate about what you said is when we give students, you know, that open door and open window rather than, you know, a very narrow passageway, it also gives us an opportunity to learn so much, right? Like I learned so much from my students when they come up with ideas that I never thought about and completely different ways of thinking about things that we normally wouldn't see from them because we're giving them so few opportunities to represent what they know.
I appreciate that as well. And I liked that they acknowledge that it takes time. I think it's absolutely worth it to take that time to engage in this work with students and be able to have them explore the different content that we want them to unpack. And so those are the promising instructional strategies. We highlighted the disciplinary practices, discourse, and having students use their multiple making meaning resources. But that group 2 also talked about their different modalities as well. Didn't go really into depth, but that's also valuing and understanding the different things that the students can bring as they are making sense in the math and science classroom. So I want to go ahead and let's wrap things up and unpack our thoughts. So one of the things that I want to talk about is, you know, we are in the middle, hopefully the end of a pandemic. We are at the end of that. I'm going to claim it. We're at the end of a pandemic. And when things start in the fall, I wanted to share what are some things I want next for our EL students and for all of our students. And so I want to wrap this up with some of my wishes. Well, before we get to our wishes, these are the promising practices that we have in STEM. This is something I really want you all to think about after this presentation, is that you have an asset-based view of your students. You really think about and interrogate how you think about your students, what bias do you have, and how can you improve outcomes for students by really believing that they have the capacity to learn in the classroom. Make sure you are collaborating with your other colleagues, especially teachers who specialize in supporting English learners. English teachers can also be a big help when it comes to using language in the STEM classrooms. Make sure you're developing a respectful relationship with the families and communities, and make sure that relationship goes both ways, so that it's not just you're not just valuing how you expect your families to show up into the schools, but you are thinking about how do families think about their place in your school community. And so really honing and improving those relationships and engage into the promising practices that are in your promising instructional practices. And so here's my wish that I was talking about before. I like lists, so here's 5. I want us to partner even more with families and communities. Our families are our students' first teachers, and I do think we have wonderful opportunities to really explore and respect that more. I really want us to rethink how we measure our students. I think if you have a chance to look at what Johanna talked about in this first session that Doran put together, and ungrading on a smaller scale, I really liked how she was thinking about that. On a larger scale, I'm thinking a lot about how can we rethink how we measure students on a large scale. So with large scale assessments, and that's one wish that I have is, can we rethink that? How can we harness technology? Prioritizing our students' promise and genius, rather than just focusing on what we deem a deficiency, which is not how we should be viewing our students. And then design more equitable systems for our students, as well as our teachers who are working with our students, especially at a time like coming out of a time like this, that was very difficult for us all. So before we leave, I would like for you to put into the chat one wish that you have. So I want to leave on a hopeful note of some of the things that you would like for our EL students as we enter into exit this year and enter into a new year. So what is your wish for the future? If you can just type that into the chat. Richard, that's my wish too. Incorporate some of those strategies. Give yourself a lot of grace as you do it. Like I said, with the student, I discovered when I really started thinking about how my student was thinking, it took me a while to give myself some grace. Ooh, Elisa. We have to really think about what did and didn't work. Wanda says, my wish is for teachers to have the time to really engage with the best practices and do their own inquiries about their practices. So I want to go ahead, as you all are wrapping up your thoughts and putting them into the chat. I want to say thank you for coming and chatting with me today. I like what Ms. Lee just said. I think this is really about giving our students, our EL students, a voice in the classroom. It's what they deserve. And we need to hear what it is that they have to say. And so let's continue to be vigilant about supporting all of our students, and especially our English learners in our classroom. Give them the space to learn, the opportunity to learn, and the opportunity to speak, communicate, and collaborate. If you have any questions, my email is right here. You can find me on Twitter as well at KRenaeP. I'll be sending you the slides, and thank you again so much for being a part. And that's it. I'll hand it over to Doran.